May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. Across Britain, millions pour into the streets. Church bells ring for the first time in 6 years. Strangers embrace. Children wave flags they've never seen flown in peacetime. But beneath their feet, in the darkness below London, Manchester, Birmingham, and hundreds of towns across the country, a different world sits silent. Miles of concrete corridors, reinforced steel doors, bunkers that held Britain's greatest secrets, command centres where generals planned D-Day, underground factories that built the weapons that won the war, shelters where thousands huddled during the Blitz. The war is over. The bunkers are empty. Their lights flicker off one by one, and then something strange happens. These structures don't simply disappear. They don't get demolished. Instead, they vanish into a bureaucratic fog, sealed, classified, forgotten by the public, but never truly abandoned. By 1946, over 40,000 hardened structures existed across Britain. Everything from neighbourhood shelters to vast underground command complexes. Each one cost a fortune. Each one held secrets. And almost overnight, they became Britain's most inconvenient truth. The war was over, but a new mystery was just beginning. What really happened to thousands of British secret bunkers after the guns fell silent? To understand what was lost, you first need to understand what was built. Between 1939 and 1945, Britain constructed the most extensive network of underground and hardened structures in its history. The exact number remains classified, but declassified documents reveal at least 40,000 significant installations. This includes 3,500 major military bunkers, 1,200 Royal Observer Corps posts, hundreds of underground factories, and tens of thousands of civilian air raid shelters. The scale was staggering. The cabinet war rooms beneath Whitehall covered 3 acres. The Drakelow tunnels in Worcestershire stretched for 3.5 miles underground, carved from solid sandstone. The Corsham quarries in Wiltshire were transformed into a subterranean city capable of housing 4,000 people. These weren't just shelters. They were Britain's insurance policy against annihilation. Entire government departments relocated underground. Factories producing aircraft parts operated in converted caves. Communication hubs coordinated naval convoys from bunkers 100 feet below the surface. The construction consumed 6 million tons of concrete, 800,000 tons of steel, and cost over £200 million in 1940s currency. That's equivalent to £9 billion today. Every major city had its own network. Every military installation had hardened command posts. Every coastal region had observation bunkers scanning for invasion. This was Britain's second landscape, invisible to the enemy, essential to survival. But victory brought an immediate problem. What do you do with 40,000 bunkers when the bombs stop falling? The answer would unfold in stages, each more secretive than the last. June 1945. The champagne has barely gone flat when military surveyors begin their work. Teams of engineers fan out across Britain with a simple mandate: assess every hardened structure. Which ones are worth keeping? Which ones should be destroyed? Which ones must never be spoken of again? The immediate aftermath was chaos. In London, thousands of civilians emerged from the deep-level tube shelters that had been their homes for years. Aldwych Station, which housed 1,500 people nightly, emptied within a week. Bethnal Green Shelter, where 173 people died in a crush in 1943, was sealed with minimal ceremony. The smell of unwashed bodies, dampness, and fear lingered in the corridors as workers bolted the steel doors shut. Surface shelters told a different story. The Anderson shelters, those corrugated iron burrows in back gardens, became garden sheds almost overnight. Over 2 million had been distributed during the war. By 1946, they were storing lawnmowers and bicycles. The government had bigger concerns than reclaiming sheets of corrugated metal. But the secret installations followed different rules. Within days of VE Day, military police began posting guards at sensitive sites. The cabinet war rooms were locked down completely. Winston Churchill's bunker telephone, still warm from his final wartime call, would not ring again for decades. Documents were removed in trucks. Maps were torn from walls. The rooms were left exactly as they were, frozen in time, then sealed behind blast doors. The Admiralty Citadel, that massive concrete fortress in the middle of London, disguised with climbing ivy, remained operational. Its 20-foot-thick walls still held secrets. Inside, naval intelligence officers continued their work, now focused on a new enemy, the Soviet Union. The bunker's purpose had changed overnight, but its function had not. This pattern would repeat across hundreds of installations. In the countryside, the transformation was more violent. Regional war rooms, built to govern Britain in case of invasion, became redundant instantly. These bunkers had cost millions to construct. They contained miles of telephone cable, generators, ventilation systems, and enough supplies to sustain government for months. The decision was made quickly: strip them bare. Imagine walking through a bunker in Nottinghamshire in August 1945. The steel doors hang open. Inside, you hear the echo of boots on concrete. Workers are tearing out everything valuable. Copper wiring is yanked from walls, lead pipes are cut and hauled away, steel desks are dragged up staircases, generators are dismantled bolt by bolt. The government wants its investment back. But here's what they discovered. You can't easily destroy a bunker. These structures were built to withstand 500-pound bombs. Demolishing them would cost more than the scrap value of their contents. So a new strategy emerged: strip them, seal them, and forget them. By September 1945, over 8,000 smaller bunkers had been cleared of equipment. The Home Office issued quiet guidance to local councils: secure the entrances, remove anything dangerous, and let nature take over. No publicity, no fanfare, just padlocks and bureaucratic silence. The Royal Observer Corps posts presented a unique challenge. These small, above-ground bunkers had formed the backbone of Britain's air defence. Volunteers had spent thousands of hours scanning the skies, reporting every enemy aircraft. Over 1,400 posts existed, most in remote fields and hilltops. What do you do with 1,400 concrete structures scattered across the countryside? The answer was simple: nothing. Most were simply abandoned. Farmers found strange concrete boxes on their land. Some were filled with sand and forgotten. Others had their metal ladders removed, their hatches sealed with concrete slabs. By 1946, these posts were already becoming curiosities, ghost structures from a war that felt ancient, though it had ended months before. But the real story was unfolding underground, away from public view. The military had no intention of abandoning their most sophisticated installations. Instead, they were preparing them for a new war. The Cold War began before the Hot War had truly ended. By late 1945, Winston Churchill was already speaking privately about the Soviet threat. By 1946, the term Iron Curtain had entered the vocabulary, and beneath Britain, the bunkers were stirring back to life. The transformation happened in waves. First came the command bunkers. Installations like the Central War Room in London and the Battle of Britain bunker at RAF Uxbridge were never truly decommissioned. New equipment arrived before the old equipment had been fully removed. Outdated communications gear was replaced with more advanced systems. Maps of Germany came down. Maps of Eastern Europe went up. The government had learned a crucial lesson from the war. Underground infrastructure takes years to build, but can be activated in weeks. So they kept the skeleton crews. Small teams maintained the generators, tested the air filters, checked the blast doors. To the outside world, these bunkers were closed. Inside, they were waiting. The factory bunkers told a stranger story. Places like the Drakelow tunnels had housed Rover's shadow factory during the war, producing engines for military aircraft. When the war ended, Rover didn't leave. The company quietly continued production, now for civilian vehicles. But portions of the tunnels were repurposed for military storage. Vast chambers that once held assembly lines now stored ammunition, chemical weapons, and classified equipment. Imagine the surreality of working at Drakelow in 1947. In one section, engineers build car engines under fluorescent lights. Walk through a locked door, and you enter a different world. Military guards, crates stamped with warnings, corridors that lead deeper into the earth where even the factory workers are forbidden to go. Two worlds, one location, neither fully acknowledged. The Corsham quarries became Britain's deepest secret. During the war, these former stone quarries had stored artwork from London's museums and provided shelter for government departments. After 1945, they were transformed into something far more ambitious. The complex was expanded, reinforced, and designated as the emergency seat of government in case of nuclear war. This wasn't planning for World War II. This was planning for World War III. By 1950, Corsham could house the entire British government. Offices for ministers, dormitories for civil servants, communication centres connected to every military base in Britain, medical facilities, food storage for 6 months. The complex even had its own underground lake for water supply. And almost nobody knew it existed. The work happened behind barbed wire and secrecy laws. Local residents saw trucks entering the quarries, but never saw what they delivered. The official story was ammunition storage. The reality was far more elaborate. Corsham was Britain's plan B for nuclear apocalypse, built in the same chambers that had protected Raphael paintings during the Blitz. But not every bunker got a second life. By 1948, the government faced a reckoning. Maintaining thousands of empty bunkers cost money Britain didn't have. The country was broke. Rationing continued. Cities needed rebuilding. And underground, hundreds of installations were quietly deteriorating. The Great Decommissioning began. Military surveyors compiled lists of bunkers deemed non-essential. Regional war rooms in Scotland were stripped of their final pieces of equipment. Anti-aircraft operations rooms in Wales were handed over to local councils with the simple instruction, do what you want with them. Coastal defence bunkers were declared surplus to requirements. This created an unexpected market. Farmers could buy a bunker for £50. Local authorities acquired them for storage. Some were converted into mushroom farms, the damp darkness perfect for cultivation. Others became archives, their climate-controlled environments preserving documents from fire and flood. A bunker near Bristol became a cheese aging facility. Another in Kent housed a telephone exchange. The strangest reuses emerged from desperation. A bunker in Southampton became a nightclub in 1951, its thick walls making it perfectly soundproof. Patrons danced where radar operators had once tracked German bombers. In Cornwall, an observer post was converted into a shepherd's shelter, its concrete roof providing protection from storms that would have destroyed any wooden structure. But thousands more simply vanished from official records. This is where the story becomes murky. Declassified files from the 1950s contain massive gaps. Entire lists of installations are marked transferred to other departments, with no indication of which departments or for what purpose. Bunkers that should exist according to construction records have no decommissioning documentation. Some were sealed and hidden deliberately. The government didn't want citizens knowing exactly how extensive the underground network had been. Bunker entrances were buried under rubble. Concrete hatches were covered with soil and planted with grass. Within a few years, nature completed the disguise. What had been obvious in 1945 became invisible by 1955. Then there were the bunkers that remained operational under civilian cover. A communications bunker in Hampshire was listed as decommissioned in 1947. In reality, it operated continuously until 1968, monitoring Soviet radio signals. Its cover was a Department of Agriculture research station. Local residents never questioned why agriculture researchers needed a bunker with 10-foot thick walls. The BBC secretly maintained several bunkers for emergency broadcasting. The Wartime Broadcasting Service was planned to operate from protected sites in case of nuclear attack. Studios were built underground. Equipment was stockpiled. Recorded messages were prepared to be broadcast after the bombs fell. These locations remained classified until the 1990s. But the most dramatic fate awaited bunkers deemed too sensitive to abandon, but too expensive to maintain. They were deliberately destroyed from within. In 1949, military engineers entered a former intelligence bunker in Northumberland. Over 3 weeks, they systematically demolished its interior. Walls were sledgehammered, equipment was removed. Then, in a final act, explosive charges collapsed key structural elements. The bunker still existed, but it was now unusable. The entrance was sealed with concrete poured 15 feet deep. The official record stated simply, "Site remediated." This fate befell dozens of installations that had housed code-breaking operations, secret research, or sensitive communication networks. The government wanted them dead, but not obviously so. No rubble on the surface, no indication anything had ever existed. By 1952, the Cold War had reached its frozen paranoia, and Britain's bunker network entered its strangest phase yet. Secret construction began again. Old bunkers were renovated, new ones were built, but this time they were designed for nuclear war, not conventional bombing. The specifications changed dramatically. Thicker walls, deeper construction, air filtration systems that could screen out radioactive particles. The Royal Observer Corps was revived in 1955, this time to monitor nuclear explosions. Over 1,500 new underground posts were built, deeper and more sophisticated than their World War II predecessors. Volunteers trained to measure blast effects, radiation levels, and fallout patterns. The old posts, already forgotten, were joined by new ones. 2 generations of bunkers, built for different apocalypses, dotted the same landscape. This is when the truly bizarre stories emerge. In 1956, a farmer in Yorkshire was ploughing his field when his tractor broke through a concrete roof. He'd accidentally discovered a sealed World War II bunker. Inside, perfectly preserved, were desks, telephones, maps showing German bomber routes, and even cups of tea, evaporated to brown stains decades before. The bunker had been sealed so thoroughly that nobody had updated local records. It had simply been forgotten. The Ministry of Defence investigated, then resealed the bunker. No explanation was given to the farmer. No records were updated. The incident remained classified until 2003. And it wasn't unique. Bunkers were rediscovered every few years, usually by accident. A construction crew in Manchester, a boy exploring a cave in Devon. Each time, military police would arrive, remove any remaining contents, and reseal the site. Some bunkers developed unexpected occupants. Bats colonized the Drakelow tunnels after the Rover factory finally closed in the 1980s. The stable temperature and humidity created perfect hibernation conditions. Today, portions of Drakelow are protected as a site of special scientific interest because of its bat population. The military complex became an ecological treasure. Others became time capsules. In 1963, urban explorers broke into a sealed anti-aircraft operations room near London. Inside, they found it exactly as it had been left in 1945. Plotting tables with markers still in place, chalk writings on blackboards. A newspaper dated May 9, 1945, left on a desk. Someone had locked the door on the war's final day and never returned. The explorers photographed everything, then left. Within a month, the bunker was sealed with welded steel plates. The government's attitude toward its bunker legacy oscillated between secrecy and amnesia. Some installations were kept operational at enormous expense. Others were left to flood, collapse, and decay. There was no consistent policy because there was no political will to address the question directly. Bunkers were embarrassing reminders of vulnerability. They suggested that future wars were expected, that nuclear annihilation was planned for. Better to let them fade quietly than draw attention to their existence. By the 1970s, a new generation of investigators began asking questions. Journalists, historians, and curious citizens started mapping the bunker network through land registries, construction records, and elderly witnesses. What they discovered was staggering. The official count of wartime structures was wildly inaccurate. For every bunker the government acknowledged, there were 3 it didn't. Some bunkers had been built in absolute secrecy, with no public documentation. Workers were bussed in from different regions, told nothing about the project's purpose, and sworn to silence. These installations appeared on no maps. They consumed materials that don't appear in ledgers. They simply existed in the gaps of bureaucracy. The most spectacular example was revealed in 1979. Beneath Whitehall, construction workers broke through into a massive chamber that wasn't supposed to exist. It was a second, deeper bunker complex built below the cabinet war rooms. It had been constructed in 1940 as an even more secure refuge if the main bunker was compromised. Churchill had used it twice. Then it was sealed and deleted from all accessible records. The chamber was vast. It contained a second communication centre, sleeping quarters, and its own generator. Everything was corroded, flooded with groundwater, and collapsing. But it had existed in absolute secrecy for nearly 40 years, beneath one of the most studied buildings in Britain. If this could be hidden, what else had been forgotten? The Cold War's end in 1991 triggered a final reckoning. Suddenly, thousands of bunkers maintained for nuclear war became pointless overnight. The Royal Observer Corps was disbanded. The monitoring posts were closed. Regional government bunkers were decommissioned. The vast shelter beneath Corsham, still operational after 50 years, was finally shut down. But decommissioning created its own problems. These bunkers contained hazardous materials, asbestos insulation, lead paint, diesel fuel tanks that had leaked for decades, PCBs in electrical equipment. Cleaning them was expensive. Destroying them was complicated. Most were simply locked and walked away from. Some became tourist attractions. The Cabinet War Rooms opened as a museum in 1984, carefully restored to their wartime condition. The experience of walking through Churchill's underground headquarters became one of London's most popular attractions. Other bunkers followed: the Battle of Britain Bunker, Drakelow Tunnels, Kelvedon Hatch secret nuclear bunker in Essex, which opened to visitors in 1992, complete with its Cold War equipment still in place. These museum pieces represent a tiny fraction of the total. For every bunker you can visit, 100 remain sealed. Some are owned by the Ministry of Defence and maintained as strategic reserves. Others have been sold to private individuals. A surprising number of British citizens own former military bunkers, converted into homes, studios, or simple storage. The thick concrete walls make them naturally insulated. The security doors make them inherently safe, and the history makes them fascinating. But the majority simply decay in silence. Sealed entrances gradually crumble. Water seeps through concrete. Metal corrodes. Bunkers that withstood German bombs are destroyed slowly by dampness and neglect. In another century, many will be indistinguishable from natural caves, their human origins lost except to determined archaeologists. Some will never be found. The most secret bunkers, built with no documentation and sealed with no ceremony, are lost even to official memory. They exist in the gaps between maps, beneath fields that have been ploughed for decades, under buildings constructed long after the war. Urban legends persist about vast complexes beneath Manchester, Liverpool, and Birmingham, about tunnels connecting government buildings in London, about shelters built for royalty that were never officially acknowledged. Occasionally, evidence surfaces. In 2004, construction workers in Liverpool discovered a tunnel system that matched no existing plans. It was explored for 200 metres before it became too dangerous to proceed. The tunnel's purpose remains unknown. Official records claim no bunker existed at that location. Yet clearly, someone had excavated thousands of tons of earth and lined the tunnel with concrete. The entrance was resealed. The official explanation, Victorian sewer system. The local historians, wartime bunker. The truth is that nobody knows exactly how many bunkers existed, how many survived, or where they all are. The bureaucracy that built them was deliberately fragmented. Different departments commissioned different structures with minimal coordination. Records were classified, then destroyed, then lost. The people who built them are dying. The people who used them have mostly passed. Within a generation, living memory of Britain's underground war will vanish completely. Today, bunker archaeology has become a niche field. Enthusiasts use LiDAR surveys to detect anomalies in the landscape. They scour archives for construction records. They interview the elderly about mysterious sites from their youth. They piece together the puzzle of Britain's second landscape, one bunker at a time. What they're discovering is extraordinary. Every year, new bunkers are identified. Some are obvious once you know where to look, disguised as electricity substations or water treatment facilities. Others are completely invisible, their entrances long since buried. A few are still dangerous, containing unexploded ordnance or unstable structures. Most are simply empty chambers, slowly filling with water, waiting to be forgotten completely. The legacy is complex. These bunkers saved thousands of lives during the war. They housed the machinery of victory. They preserved art and culture. They maintained government when invasion threatened. They represented the determination to survive, to endure, to emerge intact no matter what fell from the sky. But they also represent something darker. They are monuments to the expectation of war, to the normalization of violence, to the industrial preparation for death. They suggest a world where burying entire command centers beneath cities was reasonable, where planning for nuclear annihilation was responsible governance, where the question wasn't if war would come, but when. Most Britons walk past bunker entrances without recognizing them. That nondescript concrete building in your neighborhood might once have sheltered 200 people during air raids. That odd mound in a park might be a collapsed shelter. That locked door in the basement of an old building might lead to corridors that stretch for hundreds of meters beneath the city streets. The bunkers are still there, sealed, forgotten, slowly crumbling, but there. They are Britain's buried memory, physical evidence of a time when the sky brought death and survival meant going underground. They exist in the spaces between what is remembered and what is documented, between official history and lived experience. And perhaps that's fitting. Wars end, but their infrastructure endures. The bunkers don't commemorate victory or defeat. They simply exist, silent witnesses to the fact that for 6 years an entire nation learned to live with the possibility of annihilation. They learned to bury their government, their factories, their families. They learned to survive in darkness. The bunkers are the scars that won't fade, the physical manifestation of fear that turned out to be justified. And in their slow decay, they remind us that no preparation is permanent, no defense is final, and eventually all fortifications return to earth. The thousands of British bunkers built to withstand bombs are ultimately defenseless against time itself. They endure not because they were strong, but because they were simply too expensive to fully erase. In 100 years, most will be gone. In 200, there'll be archaeological curiosities. But for now, they remain beneath our feet, holding on to secrets that most people have forgotten to ask about. The war ended 80 years ago. The bunkers are still fighting their quiet battle against oblivion, and they're slowly, inevitably losing.